Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. So, this part of the chapter, which is financial support, is basically done. We've covered it in detail. Now, this following part of the chapter of marriage relates to child custody, al-hadan. And I think after this, basically, we would be done with the chapter of marriage. That's all this is left. Al-Hadana, child custody, and it will be done. Beyond that, the book talks about al-jinayat, which is the penalties for different crimes. We may go into this, or we may then start a new book, starting again from the beginning of the fiqh, the Islamic law, again, start taking it from the beginning again, starting with the wudu, then salah, then siyam, and so on. We may go that way because the penalties and the penalties for crimes is usually something that a judge is the one who makes a decision in, and it has to be. It is applied usually by an Islamic government. And at this point, there is no real Islamic government on earth. So I think what concerns us more is knowing our deen and what pertains to us as individuals. And this is why, inshallah, once we finish the chapter of marriage, we go back and study the fiqh from the beginning again. Okay? This will be the second time we finish this book, the book of Bulugh al-Maram. And every time, inshallah, we try to expand a little bit more. We finished it a few years back, and then we started again with a different explanation that is formed of 7 volumes, and we're approaching the end here. Inshallah, as I mentioned to some brothers, I bought another even more comprehensive explanation that's formed of 11 volumes that I plan to, inshallah, start. So I'm hoping we finish this chapter and then start again. I went back and looked at the chapter of marriage when we started this chapter, and I found that the first video we posted was more than 7 months ago. So I say this because recently I was listening to a guy. His name is Bill Warner. He's a big hater of Islam, and he propagates all these videos making false accusations about Islam and Muslims in general. And the Prophet ﷺ, he attacks the Prophet ﷺ regularly in his videos. And he says, I'm a proud kafir, which means I'm a proud disbeliever, and so on. And he lies to his audience. He bases his attack on lies. One of the things he says he's trying to scare people from Islam. He says, Islam is a political ideology. It is not a religion. He says most of the rulings in Islam are basically pertaining to classifying people into different categories. He says the Islamic law is more concerned and concentrated and focused on how Muslims view other people and how to deal with them. That's what he says. When I go back and look at the chapter of marriage alone, and this is not one of the major chapters in Islamic law, and I find that it took us about 7 months. It will be by the end of this probably 8 months just to cover it. Okay, more than 80 classes just in one chapter, and it all pertains to the Muslim life. Okay, this shows you that this man is a big liar, and this is just one chapter. And all the other chapters we've been through took us like maybe 5 or 6 years to finish this book. This shows that these people who propagate hateful propaganda about Islam depend mainly on lies and depend on the ignorance of the people. And he claims, this is how he said, he says, I wasn't into studying Islam or talking about Islam until 9/11 happened. He says, I was watching the TV. He says, and once I saw the planes hit the tower, okay, what does this have to do with Islam? This is an attack by certain people, but it is not Islam that did this to you, nor did Muslims in general do something like that. But he tries to generalize. He says, since that time, I have not watched TV again, and I spent 15 hours a day studying Islam and responding against Islam. And he says, since 9/11, that's what he's been doing. He watches no TV, 15 hours a day, and he has many videos on YouTube. But when I listen to his videos, I see, I can't even count the lies. Within 1 minute, you really cannot count the lies. One time I wanted really to come here and respond to one of his videos, but I didn't have the time to write down because the lies were so much. I said, I can't really respond to it unless I have a paper and a pen and start counting the lies one by one and then respond. Inshallah, when we have time in the future, we'll analyze at least one of his videos to show how he lies about Islam. Anyhow, we go back to al-hadana, which is child custody. We'll read the first hadith in this chapter. عن عبد الله بن عمرو رضي الله عنهما أن امرأة قالت يا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إن ابني هذا كان بطني له وعاء وثدي له سقاء وحجري له حواء وإن أباه طلقني وأراد أن ينتزعه مني فقال لها رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أنت أحق به ما لم تنكحه. This hadith alone shows you the mercy in the Sharia of Islam as opposed to Western laws. I'll read the explanation of the hadith to you, the translation. Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As, he says, a woman said to Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, O Allah's messenger, this son of mine, my womb was a receptacle for him. My breasts were a source of suckling for him, a source of nourishment for him. And my lap was a place for him to curl up in. Okay? Yet his father has divorced me and wants to take him away from me. Allah's Messenger ﷺ replied to her, you have more right to him as long as you do not remarry. This is a basic rule here in Islam with regards to child custody, that the mother has the right for child custody, period, as long as she has not married. There's details what would happen if she marries. A simple hadith like this shows you this alone is more excellent and superior to all the laws of child custody in all Western countries. Once a divorce happens in Western countries, you can see how much tens of thousands of dollars are spent on lawyers on both sides, and the fighting and the grief and the complications happen, psychological complications happen to children as the husband and wife fight who's going to have custody of the children. And Allah, I have seen some cases go for years, 4 or 5 years and longer, because they have not reached. And who's benefiting? Of course, the lawyers. The lawyers, and who's being harmed? Number one, the children. And one simple hadith here, one single saying of the Prophet ﷺ solved this whole problem, which they cannot really get. These guys cannot get. That's why one of the Orientalists, or I don't recall his name, he says, he studied the biography of the Prophet ﷺ. He says, I wish somebody like the Prophet ﷺ was alive. He could solve all the problems of humanity while he's drinking a cup of coffee. Because each saying of his, and as I mentioned, the sayings are little and the words are little, okay? And he used to repeat them, and he used to be able to count the number of words he would say in any single setting. And that is a sign of his prophethood right away, because there's no human being who has this kind of quality, that you could count the number of words and he would be repeating his words in every single setting. Here, and this also shows you that Islam honors the wife and the woman and protects their rights, because they come and say to you that Islam is anti-woman and so on, against the women, and violates the women's rights. Those people are just ignorant. Now, we said as long as she does not get married. If she got married to someone, her law for her right for custody basically is cancelled. But who does it go to? It goes to the husband, because he is closer to that child than this man who married this child. And you don't know how this new man will treat that child. But if the father accepts, he feels that she married a good person, or a person that maybe he knows, or a person that is trustworthy, he can give her the right for custody, and she can continue to have the children. Okay. قال السعدي الصحيح أنه إذا رضي الزوج بحضانة ولد الزوج الأول أن الحضانة لا تسقط. And of course, he's responsible to financially care for the children. The child support is also responsible for that while she gets the child custody. So basically, custody, it looks, number one, at the best interest of the child. And number two, it looks at the right of the mother, that she has the most right of being close to her child, more right than the man. Okay? If then she gets married, it goes to the husband, the right. But he can also give up this right and say, oh no, she married a good man, I will leave the children with her. If they then dispute, she married a man and he wants custody, and let's say he's not a qualified person to have custody of the children, then we look at the second level. We look at, for instance, the grandmother of the boy from this side and this side, and we see who is in the best interest of the boy. But they say that if two people are at the same level of closeness to the child, like here, grandmother and grandmother from the father's side and grandmother from the mother's side, who takes precedence? They say from the father's side takes precedence. Okay, so if they are equal, or we have here an aunt and an aunt from the father's side and an aunt from the mother's side, they say here that it is from the father's side that takes precedence. But there is difference in opinion in this matter. What we know for sure is this hadith here is number one, the mother, as long as she does not get married. If she marries, then it goes to the father. And some scholars say no, it goes to someone, a female in the mother's side, such as his aunt or his grandmother. Okay, and that is what usually happens actually in our countries. That if she gets married, then the father has a case to make here. He has a case to say, no, I want my children. But frequently what happens is they move the custody to the next female, because normally, again, this is another general ruling with regards to custody in Islam, that the women or a lady, especially if the child is young, the lady can care more for the child than the man. So they try to give it to the aunt or to the grandmother from the mother's side, to be as close as possible to the mother. Something I read yesterday, I just wanted to tell you about. I was reading about a hadith and the number of people who were dedicated to transmitting the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ with chains of narration, because the chains of narration started right away from the time of the Sahaba to the second generation to the following generation, and the hadiths were being written right away during the life of the Prophet ﷺ, and so on, until the books were totally compiled, the total completion, because the books were written, they started to write them at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, then they were passed on. And even when they pass on a book, they don't just pass it on. You have to listen to the book directly from the author. If you found a book, you cannot narrate a hadith from that book. You're not allowed to do that. You have to have heard the whole book from the author, and he would have had to give you license, called the ijazah, give you a license, because you listen to the book from him, and then he listens to it from you to see if you have understood and you know exactly the wordings inside this book exactly. You don't mix a word for a word and so on. Once this has happened, he gives you ijazah, a license to transmit what is in the book. So whenever were the hadith transmitted from a book or book, you find the book or say, oh, this contains hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, then qala Rasulullah ﷺ. No, that's not allowed. You have to verify that this man heard it from the higher level to the Prophet ﷺ, and he has given you license to transmit the book. So this is how books were being transmitted, until, of course, books were readily available and widespread over the Muslim states. So it took, as this process was going on, it took about 300 to 400 years as this process was completely developed and the books were widespread all over the Muslim world. So how many people do you think were involved in those chains of narrations of the various hadith of the Prophet ﷺ? Give me a number. How many people do you think? Just guess. But you have to know, especially in India, in the Indian, you're not from India, you're from Pakistan. In India, in some continent, maybe that includes Pakistan at the time before separation, they continue to narrate the books by chains of narration until recently. In most of the Muslim world, they were, they were happy that now we have books. We have Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, Sunnah Tirmidhi, Sunnah Ibn Majah, so on. They have the books. Then people were not too much concerned anymore about narrating Sahih al-Bukhari, for instance, memorizing it and narrating it to the following generation by a sound chain of narration, because the book is already established. There's no fear of losing these ahadith or something going into the book, somebody interpolating or adding something, or somebody taking something out of it. This is why they had to do this process of confirming that he delivers it by, gives you the book, you write it down, verbally he reads it out to you, you read it back to him, to make sure that nothing goes in that is not of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and nothing is lost. You follow? But once the books were established and so widespread that you cannot change them anymore, because if the Sahih Bukhari is all over the Muslim world, thousands of copies. If somebody tried to change a copy, we would easily know that. Just like if somebody tries to change the Quran now, we would easily know that. You showed me one day when somebody was trying to add a word to a mushaf somewhere, immediately we would know it. Even now in the Salah, if somebody misses a word or adds a word, immediately the children will correct it. Correct? So, but in India, they continue to, up until the time the British occupied India, still the books were being narrated like this. So a British man, he looked at these books and he was fascinated how those people continued to narrate the books from son to father to grandfather or from this scholar to the higher scholar up to the Prophet ﷺ. He counted the number of men involved in narration, especially in Indian subcontinent. He found that the number was 500,000 people. 500,000 people. But the general number, till the books were established, is about 50 to 60,000 people. You follow the difference? Till the books were established, 50 to 60,000 people were dedicated in transmitting the words of one individual, Prophet ﷺ. You can imagine how much these words are preserved. If 50 to 60,000 people were so much dedicated to preserving the words of one individual, do you think there's a chance of something being lost or something being or some mistakes coming into these words? Impossible with this number and this dedication. But even as I mentioned, in some areas of the Muslim world, people continue to narrate this way. The numbers as generations continued, went up to 500,000 people. And up until now, actually, there are still people who memorize the Bukhari and Muslim by chains of narration up to Prophet ﷺ. But those are now little because there's no real need for it. But still, it's still present. Any questions about this? Okay, stop here, Sean.